Today I'm going to talk about a macro, a SAS macro that allows you to drop down to Python and execute a Python script. This macro is called UTL submit pi64310. You can even execute this macro inside a data step using do sub L at data execution time. In this presentation I will demonstrate the macro interface to Python. First, we want to pass a macro variable called sex to Python with the value m. We're going to use it to subset sashelp.class students by sex. As a side note, there's a package in R called SQL render which supports parameterized SQL. I could not find a similar Python package. Basically, you can substitute ampersand sex in the script below, in the Python script below, with @sex, where sex is an R variable. Python, we then read the sashelp.class table using Python and put it into a Panda data frame. Then we compute the mean weight for male students by age. We also compute the total number of students in the sashelp.class data set. We create a macro variable called number of students from the Python script and pass this back to SAS as a macro variable. Python then creates this transport file with the mean male weights by age. That's a v5 transport file. I was not able to figure out how to populate the label in the v5 transport file using Python. So I couldn't use the longer names in the label to rename the chopped up names in the v5 transport, so we could then be using the actual Python names in the final SAS data set. The macros and this presentation is available on GitHub in the links below. Our input is just sashelp.class. I tend to like to avoid mixed case, so I'm going to set all the variable names in SAS to be uppercase, so they'll be uppercase in Python, except it doesn't matter with SQL, Python SQL, which is really SQL-lite. Our output, unfortunately, isn't going to look like the R output, which has the actual long R names. It's going to be the chopped up names produced by the preadstat v5 transport code. And we'll also get a macro variable called number of students, and that macro variable will have the value 19 and passed back to the SAS code. The process is really quite simple. However, I do like to clear the environment before I run the interface to Python. It's especially important if you're rerunning. It's good for development to do that. So I need to set a macro variable in SAS that I can pass to Python. And that macro variable is sex, and it has the value m. It will be used down here to subset the sashelp class dataset by sex. One of the unfortunate things about Python is many of the math and stat functions are not available by default. You have to actually compile and link them to the, I think it's the Panda SQL package. And it's pretty painful to do, and if you don't want to do it, you can download this DLL from my GitHub site and use it here, and you can put it anywhere you want, but you need it to get things like sines and cosines and standard deviation, all those kinds of things which you really need. I mean, incidentally, R already has those packaged with its SQL package, so you don't need to do that with R. So we read in the sashelp.class dataset into a Panda data frame, and then we just run this simple SQL code, and you don't have to worry about indentation, you don't have to worry about upper and lower case, you don't have to worry about the output becoming something ugly or something of a very complex data structure. So what happens here is we create another Panda data frame called male ages, and if we want to get the length, the number of records, unfortunately you just don't like do n row or something. You do a CLL index function to get the number of rows. There's actually about 6 ways to do this, which I don't think it's good to have 6 ways to get the number of observations in a data set, but that's my own take on it. And some of them drop missing values, others don't. At any rate, next we export the Panda data frame to a V5 SAS transport file. And you tend to need all of these extra arguments, whereas in R it would you just need 2. You only need these 2. The output dataset name inside the V5 transport would be male ages, but if you don't specify the table name here, it'll use table name dataset, which tripped me up. So here's the output. This will be the output macro variable passed back to SAS. Incidentally, you do need to use Windows clipboard. You need to copy the macro text that you want to be in a macro variable into the Windows paste buffer, and then SAS will pull it out and macro will pull it out and put it into this macro variable. So when you do your put, well, let's run it and see what happens. So we're going to clear everything out and run it. And there we go. Okay, there's the final SAS data set, which is what we wanted. It's sashelp.class subsetted by male ages. And there's a proc contents, and here's the original output from the Python script. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this.